A very, very good morning to all of you here today and to our 1,500 delegates who are joining us virtually. My name is Melanie Noronha. I'm a Senior Manager of Policy and Insights at Economist Impact, a division of the Economist Group. And I'm pleased to open today's event, Trade in Transition, Enhancing Trade Frameworks, that has been programmed by Economist Impact. Special thanks, of course, to DP World for supporting this event and truly for the use of this magnificent space at their Expo Pavilion. Now, there could not be a more important time at which to talk about changes in global trade. As the world slowly emerges from the COVID-19 pandemic that really disrupted supply chains, but also now with events in Russia and Ukraine. And today's event is rooted in a research program that was led by Economist Impact and supported by DP World. And this program captures private sector sentiment on international trade. You know, I always say we know how politicians feel about trade, but how do companies, those on the front lines of trade, how do they feel about it? And so in our inaugural program that we launched last year, we explored the impact of COVID-19 on companies' trade operations. And in this second edition, which we are launching today, we explore how companies are navigating a turbulent trading environment amid a really uneven recovery. The research presents views from a global survey of about 3,000 senior executives across 6 regions, and that's North America, South America, Europe, Middle East, Africa, and Asia Pacific, as well as in-depth interviews with experts from around the world. So, what did we find? It's clear that trade rebounded faster than expected in 2021, and that's after a sharp decline in 2020. In fact, in October last year, the WTO revised its estimates for global trade growth to 10.8%, and that's up from their initial estimate of 8% from earlier that year. And of course, respondents in our survey concurred with this. 68% reported an expansion in exports, and 62% reported an expansion in imports last year. That's in 2021. But this surge in demand was met with supply shortages. And that came about mainly due to 2 reasons. The first was that new waves of COVID led to disruptions in business operations as staff had to quarantine or recover. And that reduced output in some industries. The second reason, in other sectors, such as agricultural production or in microchip production, supply is relatively inelastic. And so producers were not able to ramp up production to meet these changes in demand. So combined, these 2 forces, so the surge in demand, as well as the supply shortages, mean that companies today are trading in an inflationary environment, which has now been exacerbated by the events in Russia and Ukraine. Companies we surveyed said that high transport costs will be the top challenge in 2022, and this is expected to persist well into the year. One of the clearest trends during the pandemic has been the shift away from efficiency to resilience. That's from just in time to just in case. And we have the data for that as well. So only 14% of companies surveyed are using the just-in-time approach to supply chain management. But the largest share of respondents, about 27%, they're holding 1 to 3 month buffers. And this increase in inventory has really put immense pressure on warehouse and logistics infrastructure. Now, given the redundancies that holding this level of inventory builds into the business, executives, and this is really important, executives are now really seeking new ways of increasing efficiency along the value chain. And they're using advanced technologies to streamline trade operations, and they're even turning to sustainability measures to reduce resource consumption. In terms of technology, companies are using a suite of technologies, and we saw an uptick in terms of use of 5G combined with IoT, in terms of digital solutions for customs, and also of advanced automation. And all of this is really geared towards gaining more real-time insight on shipments, aimed particularly at reducing delays at ports. Now, another important trend that we're keeping an eye on is diversification versus regionalization of trade. And our survey results show that most companies are diversifying their supplier base regardless of location, rather than regionalizing. So 48% of respondents chose to diversify regardless of location as their primary reconfiguration strategy, whereas only 12% of respondents were primarily regionalizing and only 5% were reshoring. Now, some of this may start to shift as regional trade agreements come into force, so it's definitely a trend we're watching very closely. Overall, too, companies reconfigured their supply chains faster than expected. Executives reported that on average, it took 7.9 months to reconfigure supply chains, compared with 8.5 months estimated in our 2020 survey. And we really believe this is testament to the agility of the private sector, of these companies as they navigated pandemic-related restrictions. We're seeing that companies have shifted their mindset. And the recurring theme in the conversations that we're having with executives is that they're not counting on the environment of the trade landscape to improve. Instead, they're focusing on agility, and they're focusing on what they can control. There is really so much more detail in our report, so I do urge everyone to visit our dedicated hub for this program, Trade in Transition Economist Impact. But for now, I'm hoping these results set the scene for our discussions this morning. We have a great lineup of distinguished speakers here today, and we encourage you to participate, to ask questions to our panelists. And for those joining us from home, from virtually, please do send in your questions, and we'll do our best to accommodate them during the course of this discussion. And with that, I'd like to invite on stage the moderator for the first session. Please welcome Henry Kerr, economics editor at The Economist.